واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذا كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته.
Professor Anisa Mehdi is a journalist and professor at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. Her late father, Dr. Muhammad Mehdi, was a human rights and political activist in Arab and Western circles. He was Malcolm X's contact in the Middle East and was his political and spiritual mentor during his pilgrimage in Mecca. Here to enlighten us with her rich experience and perspective, please help me welcome Professor Anisa Mehdi.
It's really a delight to be here with all of you this evening. This is my first visit to Quebec, and it's about time I got myself to this great city of Montreal, and I want to thank the Journalists for Human Rights, and I want to thank the Thaqalayn Muslim Association for this very kind invitation. My husband and I, my husband Peter Zimmerman is here with me, and we're just delighted to have this opportunity. It's a very important and revealing topic. This question of the legacy of Malcolm X, education and human rights, and media literacy. And Wid Naima, who approached me and invited me to come here this evening, sent me this quote to get me thinking about what I would share with you. And like Guy, I'm going to start with a story. It's just what we do, isn't it? Occupational hazard. On the other side of the great North American continent, 55 years ago, my father, Dr. Muhammad Taqi Mehdi, took the podium at a conference and said, if the Zionists, as they claim, have not forgotten Palestine over the last 2,000 years, it is reasonable to assume that the Arab refugees of Palestine who were born there will not forget their homes. So if Zionists have not forgotten Palestine over 2,000 years, it's reasonable to assume that Arab Palestinians who were born there will not forget their homes. This was the pillar of my father's logic on the Palestine-Israel conflict for the rest of his life. That conference took place in Hollywood. And in that conference, he is quoted to have criticized the control that Zionists have over the medium of communication in America. Notice he did not say Jewish control over the media. He said Zionist control. My dad always distinguished between the religion of Judaism and the political movement of Zionism. Well, what was this conference? Get to the point, Anisa. What was this conference? It was a celebration of Pakistani independence. The year was 1958, so that made it the third annual celebration of Pakistani independence, the Pakistan Republic Day. My dad was an immigrant from Iraq. He was finishing up his PhD at the University of California at Berkeley, and he was a featured speaker. And so was Malcolm X. You see, even as early as 1958, Malcolm, representing the Nation of Islam in its proto-Islamic phase, was seeking a connection with other Muslims in America. When he took the podium, Malcolm said, it was absurd for the Arabs to expect fair treatment from the white media, since it was controlled by the Zionists. Now, my dad wouldn't have called the media white. He didn't need to. That wasn't his beef. But Malcolm heard him, got his point, and internalized it. Because the way mainstream media reported on Arabs and Arab issues was parallel to Malcolm's own experience of fair and unfair reporting by the establishment media on Black Americans, whether they were Black American Christians, Black American Muslims with the Nation of Islam, or Black American adherents to Universal Islam. Next week is the 48th anniversary of the death of Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz. It's the 15th anniversary of the death of Dr. Muhammad Mehdi, who died 33 years and 2 days after Malcolm's assassination. These two men, on the fringes of the social justice movement, raised important questions for us about who's in the media, who controls the agenda, what is the establishment point of view, and how do you change it? Given the extraordinary advances in media technology in the past few years, I find that their insights are not obsolete at all, but rather all the more valuable. We don't know exactly when Dad and Malcolm X met, but we do have this photograph, which is dated February 1958, taken in San Francisco's Ferry Building, where my dad had an office. He ran the Arab Information Center out there while he was finishing up his degree. He had married a beautiful American college co-ed, as they called women in those days at colleges. My mother, Beverly Turner, was working on her master's degree at UC Berkeley. That February, when Malcolm and my dad met, I was at home with my mom, a toddler. You can do the math, figure out how old I am. My next sister, Janan, was just a month old, and our third sister, Layla, was a twinkle in my parents' eyes, but they might not have been twinkling right at that moment with a toddler and a month-old baby. So I look at these two guys with their skinny ties, right? Their black half-rimmed glasses. Both of them have the same style glasses on. Serious expressions. My dad was 30, Malcolm was 33. They're both outsiders to the majority culture in America. They are both endowed with mega smarts. You were hearing some of what Malcolm said earlier in this evening. Mega smarts. They are idealists, activists, champions, and warriors for justice. And they had to be on the edge, right? They had to be on the fringe because the impulse for change, the impulse for social change doesn't come from the middle. It comes from the outside. And then at some point, that outside, what happens is the rest of the world shifts, and what was the outside becomes the middle. And that may be part of what, the paradigm you were talking about, Guy. So they landed on this planet at an auspicious time in history, one in which mass media was just beginning to show its potential in entertainment, in news, in propaganda, and in profit, right? Because media has become quite a commercial enterprise. Each of them took it on, soldiering through ignorant questions and snide quips, relentlessly pressing their points on reporters who sometimes got it right and sometimes blew it. They were threatened by folks who didn't like what they heard, slogged forward with the flag of their mission held high, leaving their families for days, for weeks, for months, sometimes without a word, sacrificing friendships, their reputations, and their personal safety. I don't think they could help themselves. These men were bent on delivering a message, for better or for worse, by all means possible. For them, media was a shortcut to a large audience. They knew how to use the news of the day to get attention. They seized every celluloid frame and every column inch to add alternative truths to the establishment truth. Decades before the World Wide Web, Malcolm and Mehdi warned us to watch out for media manipulation and misrepresentation. Long before Facebook, they engaged people face to face to discuss perception and accuracy. They sat with reporters for hours, educating them, giving background and context for the stories they were writing about the Nation of Islam and the people of Palestine, the causes that were their life's blood. They used gimmicks, clever phrases, and manufactured photo ops long before that term was even invented. You can watch Malcolm Shabazz at work. You can, he's alive and well on the internet. And there was a beautiful montage of his work that was presented to us earlier this evening. Malcolm was never ruffled. He was always informed. He was current. He was polite. Yes, but he would interrupt, and he wouldn't stop speaking what he wanted to say, even if someone else wanted to interrupt him. He just kept on going until he made his point. I indulged myself in listening to his speeches and his press conferences while I was preparing for this talk, and I don't know how anyone could resist his confidence and persuasive skills. Whether they existed or not officially, for 40 years, my dad trumpeted the need to recognize Palestinian human rights alongside Israeli human rights. You can't have one without the other, he insisted. Reporters called him anti-Semitic. They called him extreme. But he never changed his tune, and by the time he died, they called him a moderate. We should have listened to him, more than one newsman said to me at his funeral. Malcolm Shabazz, Muhammad Mehdi, and others who precede us understood the near limitless benefits even an infant media could provide in terms of access to audiences that were essential to achieving their goals. Participating in the media, not just blaming and pointing fingers at others for having that media power. Participating is something that I've seen as a silver lining to the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. More and more young Arab and Muslim Canadians and US citizens are going into journalism, PR, and law, and not exclusively into engineering and medicine, as their mothers may have wished. You have now Egyptians, Palestinians, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans, Ghanaians. You have reports from Fatimas and Mustafas and Ahmeds and Malcolms who are joining the ranks of reporters worldwide. They bring uncommon databases and a wide worldview. They bring alternate truths and fresh questions to otherwise establishment newsrooms, and that makes a difference. Quick story from a newsroom when I was a rookie. I got a job at Eyewitness News in Boston. Big market, big station, big opportunity. It was 1982, and the Israelis were besieging Beirut. Now, the man who'd hired me was a good newsman, the executive producer, and he knew my background. It's hard not to, with a name like mine and a father as vocal as mine. So he said, and this was a time when local newsrooms started to report international news instead of just local news. I wasn't sure that that was such a good idea, but never mind, it didn't matter. I was a rookie and he was the boss. So he said, look, Anisa, I know what your background is. I know how hard you've worked in the area of the Arab movement in America. I don't want you to compromise any of your ideals, so I won't assign you any of the stories about what's happening in Lebanon. You can cover the mayoral election. We'll give you the education beat. It takes care of some other things, but I won't test you that way. Okay, well, I'm thankful that I have a job in an eyewitness newsroom. So I went about reporting the mayoral election and so on, but I did spend some time for a week doing my job and looking into the newsroom and at the population that was, in fact, writing the stories about Beirut and Jerusalem. And I went back to him a week later and I said, Randy, I really appreciate your looking out for me. I appreciate the personal concern. But, and I appreciate that you know I have biases. And I know I have biases. And I know I have biases. But what makes you think that my Jewish colleagues in the newsroom don't have biases? They may be the establishment bias, but they have not been looking at themselves critically the way I'm looking at myself. And it was one of those light bulb moments. He thought it never occurred to him. And he said, you've actually studied this material, haven't you? Yes. You know who the players are in all those different groups and the factions in the Lebanese civil war? Yes. You actually know numbers and you have contacts? Yes. He said, I ought to assign all of those stories to you, shouldn't I? And I said, if you think so. And he did. But I was present in the room to have that conversation. And that was the first of many conversations I had in newsrooms with colleagues. So with all respect to Malcolm and my father, I don't agree that the American news media is controlled by the Zionists. What I discovered was that there were people who believed what they already knew. and didn't take the time to look inside, and didn't take the time to critique and ask questions, which we are blessed to do as reporters. That's the exciting part of the job, to question ourselves, to find out whether our thesis was correct or not. And so my presence there and the increasing presence of other folks with my kind of background is having an impact on the way reporting is done. It will be a while before we can measure that impact, but it is happening, it is creeping forward. So I say, in conclusion, to please, let me say one thing before I do my in conclusion, because I really want to honor both of these extraordinary men. I know that Malcolm taught my dad a lot about courage and how to dream the American dream of justice and equality. He set an example. And to think that my father may have had a part in the education of Malcolm X is also very exhilarating. According to many sources, and thank you for mentioning it before, my father helped Malcolm get to Mecca for that life-transforming Hajj. And that makes me both proud and humble. As Muslims, they knew what the Islamic scholar Hassan of Basra declared, that the ink of the scholar is holier than the blood of the martyr. Scholar and martyr Malcolm X believed that the media was the most powerful entity on earth, with the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. But he doesn't blame the lobbies and the special interest groups. He would blame silence and complacency. And I think that today he calls on each of us to step up, speak up, and take some risks. So use the media, be part of the media, engage the media to share some of the many alternate truths that you know that may be obscured by eyes that are wide shut. Get your best, honest, and fact-checked story out there by any media necessary, and make it plain. Thank you.